We're going to start off with kind of an overview of EVs, which will include a lot of information about the City of Edmonton's programs. City of Edmonton's got some very progressive programs around electric vehicles, and Howaida Hassan from the city will be presenting that part of it. Then we're going to follow up with two presentations by owners of electric vehicles and solar systems. The first one is a residential system, Ron Kube, and he just bought a new Nissan Leaf for his system. He's got a lot of wonderful information about that. And then we've got Ron Simonsmeier, who has a commercial building with a very large PV system for his business, and he brought all three of his electric vehicles. I think his entire family's turned into shuttle drivers for us. And lastly, we're going to have Adam Yereniuk from Kube Renewables to talk about pretty much solar chargers, installation of chargers for EVs, as well as delving a bit into the economics of PV systems and EVs and how they fit together. Howaida Hassan is the General Supervisor with the City of Edmonton and currently leading the development of Edmonton's Transportation Master Plan. Part of Edmonton's overarching city plan, Howaida has 12 years' experience working on transportation-related projects, including traffic flow modeling, household travel surveys, policy and strategy development. Her recent role with the city's energy transition team had her focusing on reducing Edmonton's greenhouse gas emissions and energy use from transportation sources, including leading the development of Edmonton's electric vehicle strategy and smart transportation action plans. So Howaida, it's wonderful to have you here. And Howaida also brought her nice new BMW i3. It's out in the parking lot. Hopefully she'll tell us a bit about that. So welcome, Howaida.
Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. When Rob mentioned this event to me, I was just in the process of transitioning to a new job, but I had spent a good year and a half of my last part of my career working on the electric vehicles. We have goals around climate resilience, and the electrification of transportation is a key element in how we're trying to achieve that climate resilience. So we also have our energy transition strategy, which speaks very specifically to electrifying transportation as a means of reducing our carbon footprint from our transportation on road. So just kind of to give you some context about the transportation sector in Edmonton, it accounts for about 30% of our emissions. On road is about 24%, about 42% of our energy consumption. So that's the amount of energy we consume for all of our buildings combined in our city. And vehicles produce a host of air contaminants as well, so there's an air quality impact. And what we do know is that we're certainly not decreasing the amount of trips we're making by our automobiles. We're just increasing them. So in a recent study that we've done, the Household Travel Survey, we found that over the past 2 decades, we've increased the number of car trips by 670,000. So that's a nearly 40% increase. So there's certainly a real reason for us to be thinking about what do we need to be doing about transportation and reducing our footprint there. So why the focus on electric? Well, it is a ubiquitous form of energy. It's available just about everywhere. We can produce it in a variety of different ways. And it really builds that sort of energy resilience into our transportation system so that we're not relying on just one fuel. And so there is, in this particular plan, a focus on electric and hybrid vehicles, so the variety of vehicles that actually plug in to energize. So what is an EV? We'll just kind of go through the 2 types of vehicles that we're focusing on. So fully electric vehicles use only electricity. They have 0 tailpipe emissions, and they're fairly cheap to operate and maintain. Plug-in hybrid vehicles use a mix of both electricity and gasoline. They have a range of about 20 to 80 kilometers before they need to switch over to that gasoline vehicle. And they're also cheaper to operate and maintain than even a hybrid vehicle. So we've done, as part of our electric vehicle strategy development, we've looked at and modeled some of the benefits that we think we can anticipate from the use of electric vehicles sort of going forward out to like 2040. So we cumulatively over the years, we would anticipate about a 600,000 ton reduction in greenhouse gases, a 9,500 megajoule savings in energy, and then about $90 million in savings to EV owners themselves through the fueling of the vehicle and operations and maintenance. But there's a host of other benefits to Edmontonians, even if they don't own an electric vehicle, and that comes from improved air quality, reduced respiratory diseases, that reduced urban noise, so we know that noise is a particular issue in city settings. And then we can think about also in the future, this compatibility perhaps with automated vehicles that we anticipate could have an electric drivetrain propulsion. And then of course the energy resilience that I spoke about as well. So what are we seeing in terms of electric vehicles and how are they taking hold? So I'll start globally and kind of work our way down to Edmonton. So we do know that globally, just at the end of 2017, we hit a sort of a landmark where we have actually 2 million electric vehicles on the road worldwide. 1.2 million of those were purchased just in 2017. In terms of national trends, and I should say on a global level, it's actually China that leads the way in that market. In terms of national trends in Canada, we have about 50,000 vehicles on the road at the end of 2017. A good deal of those are out east, where there have been pretty generous rebates, not anymore for Ontario, but in Ontario and Quebec and BC really leading the way there in the number of vehicles that we have. So where does Alberta fall? It's that little tiny fourth slice. It's not that impressive at the moment, but we're getting there. So we have about 1,100 vehicles on the roads in Alberta. That was as of the end of 2017. That number is steadily increasing. That number itself is almost a 50% increase from 2016. What about Edmonton? So we only have just about 400 vehicles in the city right now. Again, that's about a 60% increase over the previous year. And so Edmonton accounts for about a third of the vehicles in Alberta. There's about 15 model types that are pretty prevalent and popular. Tesla tops them off for sure. The Nissan Leaf, though, the Volvo, and so on being pretty popular. And these are all photos of vehicles that are charging here in Edmonton. And then there's us. I've become an EV EV owner as well, and the kids actually quite like it. They find it, cool, and I actually think it normalizes it for them that they have the experience of being in one at a young age and recognizing that it's not different from another car. In fact, from their perspective, it's better in so many different ways. But definitely, like the next generation doesn't have a lot of the hang-ups maybe that we might, having grown up with gasoline vehicles. So there's a lot of great benefits that we've kind of talked about. So what's the holdup? What are some of those barriers? We heard a few being shouted out. And I think what I heard being shouted out from the floor today is reflected in what people feel just about anywhere when it comes to electric vehicles. They're expensive. What about the driving range? Where do I charge it, for that matter? And I really don't get the kind of vehicle I want, especially here in Alberta. We want pickup trucks. We want SUVs, right? So what we do know is that the battery costs have been falling, and not just falling linearly, but exponentially. So this is good news. So when we see the cost per kilowatt hour just hovering around $200, that's fantastic news. That means we're reaching parity with an average gasoline vehicle in terms of cost and price. There's also concern about range. And so we looked at the range of various vehicles that are available on the market, from a Nissan Leaf to the Tesla, which has a longer range. And then we also looked at what the average total trips lengths made in Edmonton, and we found for the average household, this is local data from the Household Travel Survey conducted in 2015, the average household about 25 kilometers made for an average trip for the day. So well within the range of vehicles, even the lower range vehicle like mine is about 140 on a good day, ranging up to 400 for a Tesla. And then there's plenty of places to actually charge while on the go. So in Edmonton, where we only have 400 vehicles, we actually have 30 charging locations. This varies from malls to businesses, hotels, and so on. Alberta, actually Edmonton was the first to get a DC fast charger in Alberta, and that's at Londonderry Mall. It's part of their solar array as well. The City of Edmonton is actually working with ATCO to install curbside charging, so that's something that's in in the works. And they were actually, ATCO's also been working on a project to electrify the QE2, so they're installing them at Calgary, Red Deer, and in Edmonton as well with fast chargers. And the City of Edmonton is also doing mapping to kind of understand where are the next hotspots that we need to be looking at and considering when EV charging is being installed, either by the city or by private sector who are interested in doing that. And then in terms of vehicle options and choices, certainly they were limited at one point. We're seeing more and more of car manufacturers coming forward and saying that they're going to make more and more of their future fleets by 2020 electrified and so on. So there is going to be more options certainly on the way. So I heard other concerns too, and there was kind of, what about cold weather? And this was a concern of mine actually before we got our car. Definitely the literature shows that about a 25 to 40% decrease in the range is to be expected. I can vouch for that with our car. We have seen that. But just like any other vehicle, it also depends, your fuel economy depends very much on how you drive your vehicle. So if you're a lead foot, you're going to see faster depletion of your battery. It depends on how much you like your cabin heating. My husband says just use the seat heaters. So like if you can sort of manage that, that range a little bit. And then of course the EV technology is actually improving where you have the manufacturers are recognizing that range could be a limitation and they're working on this. This isn't something that's stagnant. The range of the vehicles has been increasing quite a bit over the years. So things like preconditioning remotely is becoming available, things like that. And what about the coal-powered car? I mean, much to my chagrin, I actually saw a Tesla that said coal-powered as its license plate here in Edmonton. Made me laugh, but not really. So the Alberta grid is greening. So we do know, some of you might be aware of the province's actions to decommission coal by 2030, but also increase the renewable energy on the grid by 30% by 2030 as well. Having said that, even with the grid we have in place today, there are studies recently completed by the U of C that show, University of Calgary, that show EVs generate 1.24 tons of GHG less per year than a gas vehicle in Alberta, even with the grid we have. So that is small compared to, say, a province like Ontario or Quebec or BC, where they're on more renewable energy for their electricity. But it just goes to show that it's the efficiency of the vehicle that's actually, propelling us to be able to get those gains in carbon reduction. So typically speaking, a unit of energy in an electric vehicle, you get about 80 to 90% of that in propulsion, whereas a unit of energy in a gasoline vehicle, only about 25% of that is actually used to propel the vehicle. The rest is lost to heat and so on. So hence the idea of like 3 to 5 times more efficient an electric vehicle is than a conventional vehicle. And I guess the other piece we need to keep in mind is, I don't know about you, but when I purchase a vehicle, I'm not, buying it for the next 2 years. I'm buying it usually for the next 8 years or so, 10 years, and it remains in operational use on the road, whether it's by yourself or the person who buys it after you as a used vehicle, probably for about 15 years. We're actually building our cars to last a bit longer than they used to. And so we need to be thinking about the lifetime emissions associated with that vehicle. So if I buy an EV today, it'll only get greener over time as our grid continues to become cleaner. So I want to talk a little bit about Edmonton's electric vehicle strategy now, and what are the things that we're considering. So the approach that we took to developing this strategy was to first do a best practice research and understand what it is as a city, municipality, what are those levers and things that we can push to help advance and prepare for electric vehicles. So we conducted a best practice research. There's lots of jurisdictions in the US and Europe that are really advanced and are trying really interesting things around this. We did stakeholder consultation with industry and city folks to kind of understand what are those things what are those barriers that are stopping people from purchasing electric vehicles, and how can we as a municipality overcome them? And then we did research with Edmontonians. We wanted to understand why is the average Edmontonian not purchasing an electric vehicle? And we also did some of that modeling of future EV impacts. So we commissioned a sort of a simulation calculator that would help us understand some of those benefits that I spoke about earlier. So through all this work and synthesized what we learned, we found that there was kind of 6 real areas of opportunity, and it's not real rocket science around this. Like these are kind of also the same areas that other cities would look to be impacting. It's around education and marketing, especially when in Edmonton and in Alberta, there's sort of a low level of understanding about electric vehicles and what they are. There's a good amount of work that we need to do around educating and marketing to Edmontonians. Electric vehicle charging infrastructure, so just really being able to have opportunities for people to charge and understand that that infrastructure will be there when they need it, when they do purchase their vehicle. There's opportunities for incentives and financial tools. Regulations, of course, that's always a lever for governments and municipalities. City leadership, so what can we be doing within our own city operations to lead the way? And then there's a lot we can do around partnership and collaboration. So I'll go through each a bit of these sections in a bit more detail, just to kind of give you an idea of the types of things we could be doing. So in terms of public education and marketing, this is, events just like this, actually being out and actually experiencing what an EV is like, getting to sit in one, talking to an owner and so on, so helping to support those types of activities. Supporting Drive Electric Week, which the EVA will be putting on in a few weeks. And then there's also a bit of education, we think, around just the professional community, around car dealerships and so on. There seems to be less information available about the benefits of EVs, what they offer, and even just having them available in the showrooms for people to try. Around the EV charging infrastructure, so this is really about how do we improve those opportunities at home, the workplace, and on the go. And I should emphasize that the majority of your charging actually takes place at home. I liken it to your phone. When you get home, you plug in, and by morning, you have a full charge. The electric vehicle is very much a similar kind of thing. You're charging mostly at home, and you're looking for those opportunities when you're out to top up, kind of. So we know that we have to concentrate on that home charging piece, creating opportunities for people if they want to install a level 2 charger, for example, and thinking about buildings that are being newly built. Are they considering the infrastructure that's needed to support EV charging into the future? We want to think about doing some pilot projects, looking at where EV charging would be most used and make more sense, and then collaborating provincially and with some of our regional partners on that long-distance infrastructure that's going to need to be in place, because obviously we don't use our cars just to travel in the city. We also want to travel outside of our cities with them. In terms of incentives and financial tools, so we can have some non-permanent incentives and ongoing benefits. So not all incentives have to be in place forever, but some of them need to be there just to jumpstart the market and get people thinking about things. So that could be a rebate, say, on an EV charger. We can think about non-financial benefits, say allowing electric vehicle owners to use high occupancy vehicle lanes, for example. And then we can advocate to other levels of government as well for vehicle purchase incentives, retirement rebates. So if you retire your clunker or an older vehicle, you get a rebate on that, registration fee reductions, that kind of thing. And then we, of course, have regulations at our disposal. So we can think of ways that we can ease, the installation and permitting of EV chargers in people's homes. We can think about our own bylaws and policies around EV charging in buildings and easing the restrictions there. And then we can also support or advocate to other governments around zero-emission vehicle mandates, similar to what Quebec has enlisted, and so that's something to consider. Around collaborations and leadership, collaboration and partnership, that's really about where are those points with the other levels of government, other municipalities where we can be working together, utilities such as our partnership with ATCO to install the curbside charging and so on. And then our own city leadership. And so some of you may have heard about the City of Edmonton recently announcing 25 electric buses will be in service by summer 2020. So that's a really good example and a bold example of electrification and transportation being on our roads, people getting to experience it. Demonstration at our municipal facilities, so perhaps installing chargers at city rec centers, that type of thing. We're already doing this to some extent at some libraries, but it's more ad hoc if we could have more of a program around it. And then EV innovative programs for reducing purchase costs, so maybe a group purchase program that the city can set up with dealerships to help sort of reduce the cost of the electric vehicle. So that's kind of what I want to talk about with regards to electric vehicles, and I think there'll be a Q&A later where I'm happy to answer some questions there. I did want to just bring some attention to the fact that the city does have a residential solar rebate program. So both the Energy Efficiency Alberta and the city are offering these rebates, and they're complementary and stackable. So from the city, you get about a 15-cent per watt and 75 cents per watt from the EEA, which covers about a third of the cost. So that's That's a really great rebate. And single and multifamily homes are eligible for that rebate. Stephanie is here from our office, and she has a booth set up outside, and she can talk more about that rebate. So just kind of to tie it up, we also have like a solar potential mapping program that we're doing. So you can actually go online at myheat.ca/solar/Edmonton and kind of see what kind of, what power you can generate from your particular address. So that's a really cool tool.
Wonderful. Our next speaker is Ron Kube. And Ron is a St. Albert homeowner who, together with his wife Carol, has been looking for a way to reduce their carbon footprint. In 2016, they installed a 9-kilowatt solar system on their house, and in 2018, they purchased a brand new, latest and greatest Nissan Leaf. Ron is a very active member of the Solar Energy Society of Alberta's Board of Directors, and very much a supporter of the organization, and I'm looking forward to what Ron has to tell us tonight. Please welcome Ron Kube.
Well, thank you so much for coming. So I'm Ron. I'm a St. Albert homeowner, and I took the Solar Energy Society's course on solar electricity, and in that course I found out what the average Alberta household uses for electricity, and I was shocked to find that, click to go next. Down, right there, thanks. That our house was using well over 12,000 kilowatt hours of electricity per year. That's for a family of 4. And okay. So we decided to start a do-it-yourself energy efficiency project on the house. And this is what we found. Lighting was a tremendous amount of electricity that we were using at the time, but over the course of about a year, with some very simple low-cost improvements, we were able to reduce our power by more than half. At that point, we decided in 2016 we were going to add a 9-kilowatt solar array onto the house. And last year, it generated over 8 megawatt hours of electricity per year. So with this combination of both the energy efficiency and the solar PV, we found that both our home electricity use and our power bill was coming down a lot. And in fact, that was the amount of solar energy we generated in the last 2 years. So it's a little over 9 megawatt hours on a per year basis. But we found that with both the combination of the energy efficiency project and with the solar energy PV panels, that we found both the consumption was reducing as well as our power bill. So that led to the case of, in 2017, we produced more electricity than we used in our house. So the question is, well, what can you do with the extra electricity? So we're generating over 8,700 kilowatt hours a year. House uses 5,200. And what are the options? One option is you can sell the energy back to the grid, which is what we did the first year, depending on who your retailer is. The other option is we could use it to charge a Nissan Leaf for 21,000 kilometers. This is my wife's car. She let me borrow it tonight. I take the bus to the university. Here's the things that she loves about her car. Got to tell you a fun fact, though. So, did you know that the clock on your microwave uses more energy in a year than you use to heat your food in a year? Someone have a calculator? So 2.4 watts. Can you do this for me? 2.4. Thank you. 2.4 watts. That's how much energy that the little LED uses. Times 24 hours a day. times 365 days a year. Shout out. So 21,000 kilowatt hours. So, sorry, watt hours, right? So that is more energy than it takes to power our house for 2 days. And when I measured the amount of energy that our microwave was using over the year, I actually came to 20 instead of 21. So depends on how much you use your microwave. Obviously, maybe we don't use enough, but that was a super crazy thing for me to find out. One more fun fact about my wife. Now, I drive the car when she lets me drive the car. Kind of like driving Miss Daisy. I'm the grandfather driving. She likes to accelerate a little bit more quicker. We're sitting at the lights in St. Albert, and a vet pulls up next to us, and she reaches down and turns off the eco mode on the car. The car has different modes, right? Which turns off the regenerative braking. And I look over and you're not going to race the vet, are you? Now, the vet didn't know, but there's a lot of torque. There's over 236 foot-pounds of torque. So the car accelerates really quickly. In fact, it goes 0 to 60 in 7.4 seconds, miles per hour, or 0 to 100 in about 8. But so they're very fun to drive, as she noted here. It's very quiet. In the winter, what she likes about it, and I think this is the actual reason that we got the car, it has heated steering. It also has heated seats in the front, has heated seats in the back. In fact, as soon as you turn the car on, or if you use your phone to turn on the car, there's instant heat. You don't have to wait for the car to heat up. There's just heat right away. So when she drives it, it's like full-on everything heat. And so, yeah, it's going to use more electricity, which is really not a concern for us, because the car does have, in the summer, it's got a range of 292 kilometers. The winter's around 246 kilometers, and my wife drives less than 100 kilometers a day. And so it's never really been much of an issue. Now, in the 2018 Leaf, charging, we do not need a level 2 charger in our car. The car comes with a cable, and it has a level 1 and a level 2. So what that means is you can charge it on 120 volts, just like a normal plug-in, but you can also charge it on 240 volts. And if you look at the little picture here, this is the same socket receptacle you have for your stove. So I had an electrician install that. We don't require the additional charger, because that little box with the E symbol on it is a level 2 charger. So here's just the last little piece of data. This is some summer data. The point of this slide is just to show you that depending on how you drive the vehicle, which was the point that was made before, you use a different amount of energy when using the car, right, depending on whether you accelerate quickly or not. So thanks very much.
We also have another Ron for you. So Ron Simonsmeier, also from St. Albert. I don't know what's going on in St. Albert, but they're moving fast. Ron is the president and general manager for Alberta Construction, which does primarily bridge building in northern Alberta. He became interested in solar after purchasing an electric car and visiting a display at CISA's Future Transportation Symposium, which we had in 2013. He's a happy Tesla owner, among a few other cars, EVs. He holds a civil engineer degree from the University of Alberta, and we're very happy that he can come share his information with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak this evening. I want to talk a little bit about our solar installation, and I'll talk about our vehicle a little bit as well. I think there was a lot of good questions earlier, and I think a lot of them were answered already, so that's fantastic. Why did we at Alberco put in a solar system? One of the reasons was the price of solar had come down enough that it was economically viable for us to do so. At the time, in 2014, I think the bank was offering 1% interest, and with some math, That probably wasn't very accurate at the time, but it did turn out to be better than 1%. I had figured about 5% interest on our money to do that. We wanted to reduce our building electrical costs. We wanted to make sure that our cost for electricity was firm or fixed, and so that with the installation, if the price of electricity went up, our costs were relatively fixed. The other reason was the green energy aspect of it. I actually have a mild case of asthma, and my experience in Vancouver with the moisture and humidity was that if you're downtown Vancouver, you can smell the exhaust coming from the vehicles. It's really bad, and really all we're doing by polluting our environment is trying to dilute that, but it's still affecting us. And I know the question came up about, well, you know, you got the coal-fired power plant. You can deal with it there. You got one big exhaust pipe versus millions of exhaust pipes. That's the way I look at it, and it can kill you in 15 minutes if it's running in your garage. I don't know how many people know that, and I'm sure we all do, but do they teach people that when they're getting their driver's license? Those kind of things certainly concern me. And the other thing that we wanted to do is to support, you know, the clean environment by providing a charging, public charging station. So what we did is we used our entire rooftop to put panels on, and it wasn't enough space to actually cover our electrical cost, but we put as many on as we possibly could. NMAX, through their program, had a really good deal, and Great Canadian Solar were the people that installed it. We had an engineer analyze our roof. We were able to use a weighted roof system, weighted system for mounting the panels, and the summer months were the optimal months that we could produce electricity, so we decided to keep it at a 10% angle for that reason. This was a bit of an eye-opener for me just recently again, is that the system is rated at 54 kilowatts DC, but with the inverters, you're getting a different output on the AC side. We are grid tied, so the meter has a little indicator that shows whether it's going left or right, and whether you're putting it in or taking out of the grid. So it's a pretty simple, straightforward system as far as that goes. This system is similar to, we have a place down in California, so we decided to go with the Solar Edge system, and now I just have one application that I can look at and see what's going on in both systems. At the time we put it in, it was $3 a watt. I think the price has come down again since that time, from 4 years ago, so it probably even makes more sense to do it now. This is kind of a typical output day that I'm showing here. On the left is Alberta, and of course in Alberta we don't always have perfectly sunny days, so the graph is kind of jagged. When a cloud comes by, we lose some output on the left side. On the right side is down in California. Every day is almost a perfect day in California, you know, so you get a beautiful little chart like that. What's interesting too is because California doesn't have any winters, this is our lifetime output, 75 megawatt hours on our system. This one's maybe 6 months newer, and it's almost produced half of that. So it just makes total sense to have places like California have solar power. It's a growing industry, but it's not as well received as I thought it might be. What we're showing here as well is that from year to year it can vary quite a bit. In 2014 we had pretty good output, but some of the years are actually quite a bit less, and that has to do with the weather and also the output in wintertime. If we have a nice winter where there's a little snow or the snow melts off our panels, we do get some output. On the right side again, down in Palm Desert, you know, it's fairly consistent, not too much variation there. We are metering our building consumption, so the red area is what the building is using, and It's pretty flat when nobody's there, but when somebody shows up, it starts to go up. And that's on the left side, and then our solar kind of lags behind it a little bit because we start at 7 in the morning, and then the sun comes up, and so we see the green where we are producing more than we're consuming. On the right side is showing a week, basically, so each day is fairly regular. There are some pretty big spikes, as you can see in at some of the days, and those are events where we might have a welder running, or somebody comes and plugs their car in at our charging station at work, which is actually probably the biggest consumer of electricity from a single source. We did have somebody come at night, which was rather bothersome, quite concerning, because as I'll explain in a moment, there is a peak demand. There's a difference between residential and commercial infrastructure. Wintertime, with our setup, makes no sense to try to clean the panels. I did it for the first year, got really good exercise, but basically for the time I spent, I'd have to clean it once, pay myself $15 an hour, and that's all I'd recover for the entire month. So it really doesn't pay for us in any case to clean our panels. So we're really looking at the production in the summertime on a commercial flat roof like that. I really wanted to understand what the power bill was all about, so there is this is an example of the power bill that we have, where we see the micro generation over here, and the distribution and transmission charges. The demand charge, you just can't see it at the moment, but there is a demand charge based on the number of kilowatts. Right here is the kilowatts, so we can range from 10 kilowatts, and if we don't manage our power properly, it can go up to 30 kilowatts. And over a 15-minute interval, that's all it takes to set that meter. And then we pay the entire month for that at that peak demand. Larger installations will pay an entire year when they hit that. So our company does water and wastewater infrastructure, and they'll put in generators just to kick in when the peak demand is being requested, like if a pump kicks in or something like that, then the generator will kick in just for that, not just for power outages, but to get rid of that peak demand charge. So I have a spreadsheet that we've been using to track our costs, and the number is the 15 kilowatt, or $15 per kilowatt demand is what it is. So we don't have a huge bill compared to some installations. Our bill without the solar was about $900 a month. In the summertime, we're getting money back. In the winter, we're still at the $900. And we kind of made a mistake. We put the energy efficiency measures in place before we put the solar in. So, and of course, I'm sure everybody might be aware, may or may not be aware, you're not really technically supposed to put in a bigger solar system than you're going to for the energy you're going to consume. You're not supposed to overproduce over the entire year. So we do have a 70 amp charging station using the J1772, which is the standard adapter for a vehicle. The other technologies are the Tesla and the CHAdeMO and the CCS, which have higher outputs and are also DC. But this is level 2. Most cars will only accept 30 amp input in any case, but this does work for Teslas. It was a Sun Country charger that we put in, and it can give a Tesla up to 70 kilometers an hour of charge. That's usually how I measure charge times, is how fast I get kilometers in the vehicle. It's a little different way of thinking about it, but at a supercharger at Tesla, for example, you can get 500 kilometers per hour of charge time. So in 1 hour you can get 500 kilometers. So it pays to drive fast to get there and just sit there and, that was my thinking initially, but it doesn't work that way. We're also open 24/7, so feel free to come there and charge, but I should actually have a sign up there. Please charge when the sun's shining or something like that, because that's what we pay for. We do monitor that charging station, really not to any level of detail, but we can see if somebody charged on a particular day, and it just gives us an idea of the amount of usage that it might have. We are on PlugShare, which is a website that tracks all the different charging stations, and so we can go on there and take a look and see if anybody charged. But these days, I don't think, initially it was kind of a novelty, but nobody's really doing that anymore. And the last thing is about the car. Yeah, I got my family hooked. They're sitting over there, some of them. My wife is a Tesla owner, my daughter, and I have another daughter who just ordered one. Ironically, my son is not. He's a motorhead. He likes the noise of the engine. So, but yeah, and if you have any questions about owning an electric vehicle, I'd be pleased to answer any of those after this. So, thank you.
Yes, we have done a number of those as well, where people want the Tesla before they want the panels.
Gotcha, gotcha. Thank you. And you still use the solar panels for those as well, right?
Yep, as soon as they want solar array in however many months or years, then we'll come out and tie it into the system.
Thanks.
On a solar system at home, what is the expected lifespan of the system? And are the solar panels, do they have a different lifespan as well?
Solar arrays or solar modules are warranted for 25 years, so that is the expected lifetime. In general, most of them will last a little longer than that. There's been systems installed in the 80s here in Canada. They're still up and running. So like 25 years warranted, it could very well be longer.
I've got photovoltaic modules on a cabin that are 42 years old. They're still powering the cabin. So it's very durable technology.
With the electric vehicles in the city, you mentioned HOV lanes and possibly green lane use. Was that like what the city calls bus lanes that you're talking about letting the cars use?
Yeah, we don't have a ton of them here in Edmonton, but there are a few that, yeah, the bus lanes or the taxi lanes that you've seen like along 109 Street and places like that. So those are the lanes we would consider. So these are just things that we would need to evaluate, but we've seen through the reviews we've done of other cities that those have been, I guess, particularly in jurisdictions where there's a lot of congestion, that becomes a real benefit to people. It may not offer the same benefit in an environment like Edmonton, where maybe the congestion isn't as severe as maybe Los Angeles or those kind of jurisdictions that we've looked at. But it is one kind of non-monetary way that we can offer benefits to electric vehicle owners.
Right. Now, I think you said that there was 400 electric vehicles in Edmonton. There are considerably more motorcycles in Edmonton, and most jurisdictions that have HOV lanes allow motorcycles to use them. Because traffic moves quicker, it's actually safer for a person on a motorcycle to be separated from traffic. I would very much appreciate if the city would consider that. I've been told that taxis and bicycles are okay in bus lanes, but not motorcycles for some reason. But if you're thinking about electric vehicles, please consider opening it up to motorcycle use.
I'll take it back.
Thanks.
You can get some really badass electric motorcycles, by the way. Question over here.
My question is, the 100% limit of the energy you use in the house for how many solar panels you can put up, how do they account for if you're undecided about the electrical vehicle, which would, based on Adam, it was an extra quarter or something more? Like, do they let you come back in and add 10 more panels a year later or something if you get an EV?
This is a little bit of a gray area here. So I'm not sure if Ron applied for that utility commission with the oversize that you mentioned, but you're not supposed to generate more than you consume, but if you are planning on getting an EV, it is potential that will be considered as part of your consumption.
So I can only comment in terms of how it went. When you originally apply for putting PV on your house, they say, could you please show us your electric bills? I said, sure, can I give you my electric bills from 2012, which was over 12,000 kilowatt hours a year? They said, no, you can't. You have to give us your bills from 2015. And if you remember the graph, in 2015, we were at 9,000 kilowatt hours a year. And as a result, they allowed us to put on 9,000 kilowatt hours, 9 kilowatts of panels. As a result of doing an energy efficiency reduction, we dropped our consumption then to 5,200, which then allowed us to export in that first year. So it wasn't by intention. And then we thought, well, not getting paid very much for the electricity, I think is got a check for maybe a couple $100 for the exported energy, along with renewable energy credits that we received. And so I was looking for a different way to reduce the GHG, and electric car just kind of made sense because I could still be net zero on my electricity consumption side. So currently we're planning on consuming around 8,700 kilowatt hours in a year when you add the house plus the car, providing my wife drives it for 21,000 kilometers.
When you charge your vehicle at home and you have your own solar panels, you're paying for that fuel, we'll call it like that, or energy. If you go to a commercial center and you plug in, you're not paying for it. It's kind of free. What is going to be in 10 years from now when there is a lot of electrical vehicles? How is the city going to charge for the energy that you're producing? That'd be one question. And the second is, if you overproducing energy in your own home, can you actually sell that energy to vehicles as a second business? Which is possible, right? I'm just curious. As a community, you want to give everything free, fair enough. But there is a potential for business, and how that city will approach, or how will the charges will be at some point, because we all know that sooner or later, any kind of energy or fuel is money maker, right? So how is it going to work?
So I'll answer the first question, and maybe, So I'll answer the first one. We have as a city, a couple of EV chargers around town, around the libraries, and they are free right now. We've done just some cursory analysis that shows that, with the number of vehicles that there are right now, that the energy cost is quite low to the city. Like, we're not talking a very large amount as compared to the energy use of, say, the rec center that it's at, or the library that it's at, and so on. So in the short term, as a way to incent the behavior and incent that increased use of electric vehicles or purchase of electric vehicles, we see it as a benefit to offer that for free for now. Certainly into the future, the city does see, maybe it's not the city who's installing these charging stations, maybe it's private entities. We're already seeing that right now. As an example, I mentioned the ATCO curbside charging. Those units are owned and operated by ATCO. They will choose to either offer that service for free initially or to charge for it. So we anticipate that as the EV market grows, that the private sector will become more involved, and yes, likely there will be charges assigned to the use of the station as a service. But right now, like I mentioned, there's about 29 locations around Edmonton. All of those are free with the exception of one at the University of Alberta, which charges 25 cents per kilowatt hour. So it at the moment doesn't make a lot of sense to be charging for the electricity. It's a small amount given the demand. But as we progress and as we increase the demand of electric vehicles, certainly there will be eventually, the move away from gasoline will mean that there will be more vehicles using electricity, and we'll have to charge for that as a city.
Can our grid system handle if there was an influx of EVs purchased, if everybody wasn't adding panels to their house to compensate for it?
So as part of the EV strategy work that we did consult with the utilities and asked exactly that question. What are the risks associated with a rapid pace of increased electrification of transportation? And so they actually weren't concerned on a grid-wide level is what we heard from them. They were more concerned about clustering of EVs, say in older neighborhoods where the infrastructure can't handle it yet, and so things like transformers, upgrades to transformers might be needed, and so on. They didn't have any short-term concerns. just given the pace of EV adoption right now. But it's something that they're keeping their eye on. So it's not something that the utilities are ignoring. They're aware of it. It's on their radar, and they're doing long-term planning.
This kind of sounds like the propane-powered vehicles honeymoon, where everybody was, you know, trying to coax into getting into propane-powered vehicles and subsidies and low, cheap propane, and all of a sudden the prices skyrocket and kind of put that right out of business. And I sort of see this sort of trend happening here with the electric vehicle. Everybody's offering it for free right now, and people are going to buy their electric vehicles and jump on the bandwagon, and then the costs will begin to escalate, and there won't be anything cheaper in the future. It won't be any cheaper than operating a gasoline vehicle currently is. So, you know, that's kind of, to me, kind of puts a damper on the whole idea of getting on this electric vehicle trend and the cost and buying them and so on and so forth, when eventually there won't be any more freebies.
A few comments there. One is, one of the biggest benefits to EVs isn't that they're cheaper, it's that you're now not using fossil fuels to power your vehicle. The whole idea is that eventually you pair it with renewable energy and you have a sustainable lifestyle that doesn't emit carbon dioxide or other emissions. So that's kind of the big benefit, especially over propane, where you're just substituting one for the other. And the numbers showed earlier is EVs do have a lot lower of an operating cost. So there is just immediate savings from oil changes and motor overhauls alone.
Well, I get your point, but I just see it as a bit of a dark side for the future.
So Gordon's done quite a bit of work around this area, so I'd like to ask him to reply to that, if he will.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's a really good, these questions are all really, really good. I did a back of a spreadsheet calculation, and if all the 3.3 million vehicles in Alberta, all different types, all 3.3 million were to be electrified now, we would increase our electricity consumption over the year by 50%. And right now we have roughly 50% extra generating capacity in the province. So if we charged our cars not so that they overloaded the local infrastructure, we'd be able to charge all our 3.3 million cars right now. And things are changing, so as the electricity companies aren't worried, because they'll change with the times as the times change. So that's one point. There was somebody that asked a really good question about lifetime of the solar array. Roughly, I say that 20 years is when you change the inverter. But this whole idea of a solar module lasting 25 years is a misnomer. It's the warranty that is 25 years. And the warranty says, the performance warranty says, that at 25 years, the solar PV modules are working 80% as good as new. So, if the payback is, say, 15 or 16 years, that means that at 15 or 16 years, the thing's paid for itself and it's now giving you free electricity. So, at 25 years, are you going to say, oh my goodness, my solar modules are only working 80% as good as new, I have to throw them out. I can't stand free electricity. Really? So, there's a degradation process of about 0.5%, 0.6% per year. So that really means that in 100 years, they're working half as good as they are now. So how long are they going to last? We don't know. For some reason, I can't figure out. We don't have 100-year-old solar modules yet. So we don't quite know how long they're going to last ultimately. But 25 years? No. Now, the solar modules in my house, I'm very proud to say, are 23 years old. Some of them work, and some of them don't. My system doesn't work anymore, but that's nothing to do with the solar modules. It's because the inverter packed it in, and then I turned it off because it wasn't worth my time to fix it. That's that. So there's all sorts of other reasons.
If you have an electric car and the price of electricity goes up, you just got to buy some solar panels, probably from him.
And you have to keep in mind that the fuel equivalent price of electricity right now is 30 cents a liter. So if the price of electricity doubles for some crazy reason because everybody's using electric cars, oh well, we're paying 60 cents a liter equivalent for our fuel for our car instead of $1.20 to $1.30.
Ron Simonsmeier, your system doesn't yet have energy storage, or did you get that installed? I heard you were working with Iguana.
Yeah, that's correct. I didn't mention that just for time. We have been working with Iguana and NMAX to put in a battery system to peak shave, cut the peak power demand off, and they're going to install it next week. So I don't really have anything to report at the moment, but they have been, they have actually directly been monitoring our consumption and have all the data to support the size of battery that they think that will work. It's a pilot project. We're not paying anything for it. It's done through Alberta Innovates. I think they're going to pilot it for about 4 months, which is going through the winter, so that's probably going to be the toughest test on that system. And after the 4 months, there's going to be an offer apparently for them to sell it to us. I don't have to buy it, but we'll have a good hard look at it.
Great. Beth, you got a question?
Yeah. Yeah, so Howaida, is that how you say your name? I'm not too sure. Okay. This is kind of back to the your local transformer question, and I already had seen some notices that with solar, that if there was too much solar in the neighborhood, that they would start asking customers to upgrade, the transformers. And then also, now with electric vehicles. So is there any plan to try to coordinate with the utilities so that way the cost doesn't fall on to the consumer?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I didn't realize that there was those notices going out, so that's interesting. I think certainly one of the things that we've identified through the strategy is the collaboration and partnership piece, and things like that are what we would want to work with the utilities to help mitigate any kind of impacts to the consumers that are trying to make these choices that as a city we would be supportive of. And so yes, definitely working closely with utilities to help identify where they're seeing issues and where as a city we can help to support would be something we would want to do.
Or like, for instance, make it a standard for 200 amp panels, so that way there's more capacity for people.
Yeah, that certainly. So the strategy we developed is a 5-year strategy. So it's just kind of getting us going on advancing electric vehicles in our city. But certainly that is something we would be, probably want to look at in the future through, whether it's our zoning bylaws or things like that. What are some of the things we need to be considering in terms of EV readiness in our buildings, and things like increasing the panel size would be one of those things we would need to consider. Is one of the things we heard for sure. Yeah.
Actually, I have a comment on the transformer, because when they went and put in the solar installation in our building, the designers actually found out that the utility had undersized the transformer from day one. And the utility wanted to charge us for it, but in fact it was never matched up to the size of the service for the building in that area. They ended up replacing it. So it's funny what you find out when you put some of this stuff in. Yeah.
And did they give you a rebate on your peak demand charge?
Well, yeah, we could go back. I mean, the building's 40 years old, so, well.
I would suggest before you go batteries, go back to Epcor, solar, what's okay. Back and forth if you're consuming during the daytime when you're generating.
Warren, you got to speak up. You don't have a mic. So.
Could I get your business card?
Sure. You can probably get them to change your rate class, and you'll drop down to where you're not you don't have a peak demand charge anymore. Okay. Which is a significant saving for a commercial enterprise, okay? Because you're doing your consumption during the daytime, you're offsetting that with generation, okay? It just depends when your peak demand occurs, because they're going to charge you your Fortis. So 85% of your peak month over the previous 12 months is your peak. And so you pay 85% of that, 85% of that every following month, okay, until you peak again. So if you know when your peak's occurring, and you can offset that with solar, and you drop below your size of your service, you were 150 kilowatt service. If you can get down to the next rate class, you could probably argue with the utility that they should not charge you peak demand.
I think we're at, our meter resets every month. I don't think it carries forward to the next month that I can tell. And the meter actually, you can see it on the meter.
Oh no, it resets every month, but you still pay. It doesn't matter if you consume, say your peak is 100 one month, and the next month is 10.
Yep.
You're going to pay 85% of the 100.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
But just for everybody's information, that peak demand is about 40% of our bill.
Yeah, it's huge for commercial.
It's huge. Yeah.
But if you can time your generation to reduce your peak and drop a rate class, then you can get away from the peak demand charges totally, and that's actually probably cheaper than batteries.
Excellent.
I'd like to talk to you after. Appreciate that.
Yeah, that's one of the economic advantages of having solar with a peak demand commercial situation like that. So, question over here.
So, hi, Howaida. You mentioned quite a few prospective items that would be incorporated for EVs in the city. Do you have any indication of what are the favored or a timeline for incorporating some of those ideas?
So you're getting a sneak preview only because it's going to council next week. And so the report was released just today. So when the electric vehicle strategy draft is attached to it. And so we go to council next week to present our approach. And so we'll find out, kind of what the council direction is on this. We do know that there's an appetite. And we have the direction to move forward on electrification and transportation, but it just, the pace and the approach that we take is what we're looking for council to give us some direction on. So.
Question in the back.
Hi. During the day, when we're not at home, is when we're generating the power. Then at night, when we get home, is when we want to use the power. Are all the economic models then based on literally selling it to the grid during the day and then buying it back at night? Or is there a way to...
The economic models took into account that you'd be using your EV at night. So I believe it was a 60 or an 80% sellback on your energy. So you're getting, it's very conservative in that manner, in that you're only getting your energy rate. You're not getting any transmission or distribution offsets.
So I mean, it works out good still?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's based on.
Okay. And is there any hope that we can go like off-grid soon, i.e. to save it during the day and then use it ourselves at night versus...
Anything's possible if you have enough money to buy those batteries.
Okay, we got a question back here.
I had a question about the home installs. So other than the cost of the solar panels and the cost of someone installing them for you, what other costs are associated? Like, is there special permitting you require? Is there other things that I don't know about?
With a solar installation, the lion's share of it is going to be materials. The bulk of that being the modules, the inverters, and any kind of B-list electrical. If there's panels, cabling, the racking, all of that. Then there's also going to be generally design fees and electrician time to install it. The permitting is pretty minuscule overall in the grand scheme of an entire installation, but it certainly is a factor, yeah.
Is permitting a flat rate, or is it based upon the cost of the install?
It's based on cost of the install. Generally, it depends what county you're in, but...
How about in the city of Edmonton?
Yeah, cost of install.
So like on an average setup, what would that be?
Anywhere from 150 to 450 for an electrical permit.
Okay, thank you.
Don?
Just a question for well, maybe both Rons, although I'm thinking in particular for you, Ron Kube. I'm wondering about if you've done any calculations on the overall just financial performance of your investments. Ron Kube, you have a simpler setup, but it's an interesting program where you've combined energy efficiency with photovoltaics and the electric vehicle position. Do you have any kind of results so far?
Yeah, I can tell you the amount of money that we've saved since we started the project. And so that would be including the amount saved on gasoline. So let me just tell you how I calculate that. We're replacing a Nissan Rogue. My wife drives now the EV instead of the Rogue. So I used the EPA rating for the Rogue consumption, which is 13.5 liters. Sorry if I'm boring you with geeky numbers. I'm a geek. 13.5 liters of gasoline per 100 kilometers. So then every Friday, we record the kilometers driven on the Leaf. I go to Gas Buddy, and I go and look up the gasoline price on Friday for the gas station that my wife would gas at, which is the Shell in St. Albert. And I take their gas price, and I calculate the total kilometers driven along with the equivalent liters, and that gives me my gas saving. And so that varies week to week. And then so in total, since March, middle of March of this year, we've saved about $1,250 on gasoline. And then on electricity, over the 2 years, just for energy charges, not delivery charges, just for energy charges, about $1,500 a year. So that is then $4,200 that we've saved then over a period of 2 years. So we'll see what it goes into the future.
So do you project a payback time based on your performance so far?
So payback calculations are only estimations. Payback can only be calculated once you actually have saved the money. So if you're going to make an estimation into the future, if you could tell me what the price of gasoline will be over the next 10 years, or if you have a crystal ball, you could tell me what the price of electricity is going over the next 5 years, then I could give you a number. If I look at the historical electricity prices or the historical gasoline prices, from my way of thinking, they're too volatile. They go up and down too much. So I don't have a number. Some people will use electricity price. They'll use today's price, and they'll escalate it by 4% per year. But the variability, I can't do that, so I don't have a way of projecting forward for an estimate. You can make any assumption, and they're all good. So pick a price, and as long as you state your assumptions, I think it's valid for you, for yourself. If you're making the calculation for yourself, just pick the assumptions, state them, and say, well, I think electricity will not go up in the future, and I think gasoline will be $1 a liter for the next 10 years. And then you can make a number of calculations. Yeah.
Okay, well, just one more follow-up. Sorry,
Sure.
Ren. How much of your initial, or your initial investment, because I think you calculated all that, your initial cost, how much of that, what percentage of that have you paid? Sure. You've earned
So I didn't, when we purchased our system, there was no such thing as the solar rebate. So our system, along with the money that we spent on changing the light bulbs, because there was no incentive for changing light bulbs, total was $22,000. And so then if I take the $4,200 that I've saved to date, then that's how I would calculate it compared to the initial capital cost of that.
Hi, my question's on condominiums and EV charging. So I'm currently in a condominium, and we've had one application. I'm on the board, and we've had one application of somebody interested. And so maybe I'll start off with Adam. Have you had any unique solutions to EV charging for condominiums? I know it depends on the service coming in. We do have one power feed for the whole building in our case for about 50 units. And I just wondered if you have any idea or any experience and any approximations on costs.
We have put them in condos. What we've done has been new build, so it's been easy to plan around. I think there's a lot of different angles to that, so I think it might be better just to chat with me after.
There's actually a condo board person who I've spoken with recently, because one of the things we identified in the strategy is that retrofit piece with condos is really challenging, and how do boards decide, and like, do they need some guidance? So Vancouver's done some really good work around that. They have some guides. We're looking to produce some, but if you're looking for something immediately, Vancouver's good to look at. And I could maybe put you in touch with this person I've been in touch with, who he's working with his board right now and working through the financials, and they have bylaws they're going to have to change and things like that. So if you're interested, I can put you in touch with him.
Perfect. I'll get your info after.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, question over here.
Oh, yes, I had a question on EV batteries and battery life warranties on the different EV cars.
Just speaking personally, our manual says 10-year warranty on it.
And do you know what the cost would be to replace the battery if it say went at 10 and a half years?
Yeah, I'm not even sure on the cost of replacing an EV battery. Generally, I think they get 150 to 250,000 K of range. That's all going to depend on what manufacturer you get. I'm sure a Leaf is going to be a little bit cheaper than a Model S.
Just to comment on that, I know Nissan just raised their price for replacement battery. Nissan just raised their price on a replacement battery to, I think, about $7,000. It was around $5,000. So around the newer models, bigger battery, a little more price. But there was a bunch of Teslas that have done 300,000 kilometers, and they lost about 3% of the range. So it's not that the battery is going to just up and fail at 300, 400, 500,000 kilometers. It's that you're going to have less range. Gordon was talking about how you have less efficiency on the solar panels. Same thing. So they're still useful, but are they useful for your use case?
Question over here.
Just a comment. PV Mart has charging stations, and I believe some Best Western hotels have charging stations situated at them.
Yeah, question about rural use, I guess, and northern use. We have a 10 kilowatt system on our farm, and I'd like to get a vehicle to utilize some of the excess, the surplus. And the first thing you find is that nobody sells these vehicles north of Edmonton, and reluctantly in Edmonton. We're Toyota people. My son has a Prius from Texas, loves it. I asked why aren't they into the electric thing, and apparently they've decided to jump straight to hydrogen, is what I've been told. They may be right or wrong on that. I guess my question is, and we have the added problem in rural roads in the spring. Like typically, I think the Leaf is about 4.5 inches clearance. The Prius is about the same. Some of the SUVs slightly higher. That's one issue, but I guess the other issue is just to what extent, and I see we've got some engineers here, is cold a real issue in terms of year-round use? Do you use your vehicles, your electric vehicles year-round, the RON and the RON? You live in both places, California and here. I assume you got a good comparison there. But anyway, so how realistic is it to use electric vehicles in this climate, particularly in rural Alberta? Thank you.
I would say, in my opinion anyway, that to have a heated garage, or at least somewhat heated, to leave any vehicle out at 40 below, even if it's plugged in or electric or gas, is a problem. And so I think that's rather important from my perspective. I drive my vehicle all year round for sure. I love the fact that I can use my app to turn it on and just turn the heater on, and it'd be warm when I get into it. And I had a gas vehicle. I drive short distance to work, and it never ever got warm enough. When I got to work, I was still freezing, cold. So as far as gravel roads, I mean, they're built just as robust as any other vehicle to handle gravel, I would say. And you just have to pick the right vehicle to get you the road clearance, or talk to your grader operator more often or something.
So, any questions over here? Back in the back? Yeah.
I think we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, how many solar panels you're allowed to put on your home, is based on your previous use. And I think, Ron, you had a good use case for this, where you put on X amount of solar panels and generated a certain amount of electricity, and then you became more efficient. Is there any kind of drawback to doing that? Like I've personally never been very energy conscious, and I'm considering solar panels. So I assume that I can do what you can do and bring my energy levels down. Is someone going to come knocking on my door and being mad at me for generating too much electricity, I guess is the question.
So I heard a couple of things. I heard the question, first one was around, you know, you haven't been energy conscious, and is that a difficult thing to do? So I can't comment from our point of view. It wasn't a difficult thing to do. However, I've heard many installers have told me that the majority of people will not do that. They won't even just turn off their lights. So it really depends on your own family and whether and the reason they want to try to reduce. I found it to be very simple once we started to look into it. An example would be I got one of those little plug meters. I went into the basement. I have an old beer fridge, plugged it in, measured it for 7 days, and then said, wow, this is over 10% of my monthly power. I just unplugged the beer fridge, and we just put the beer and the wine upstairs, right? And so it was things like this. I found, for example, our home stereo system was consuming 7% of our monthly power, and that was when everything was turned off. So I just put on a power bar and I turned it off. Lighting was a big one for us. So there are things you can do. The last point is, because I'm a super geek, I've got a monitor in my kitchen. It's an LED monitor, and I put a nice frame around it so it looks nice, because my wife wanted it to look nice. And it monitors every power circuit in our house. So we automatically can see when my son leaves on anything in the house. And so I know right away, but that's a very geeky thing to do, and people will not do that, not normal people. But it is possible, because we went from not doing anything to over 12,000 kilowatt hours a year down to 5,200, and nothing has really changed in terms of our impacting our lifestyle.
I guess the main part of the question was, I mean, that's great information, is if you didn't get that EV and used your excess generated power, I know you're not supposed to generate more than you consume, but if you were going to continue to be generating more than you consume, do you have to be afraid of the man coming and knocking on your door and
I don't know.
stealing your
So
solar
I know
panels?
that over the last year, no one came knocking on our door when we over-generated.
Yeah. The answer is no. So that restriction only happens when the initial interconnection permit is applied for. At that point, as Ron said, they look at your past year's bills. You have the option of telling them you're going to put in an EV and give us a break kind of thing. So from there, that determines the size of your array. But you can export all you want through the array, and there's no problem with that. Nobody's going to object to that once it's in. It's all designed to export more in the summer and buy back in the winter. That's the magic of having the essentially big battery of the utility there to allow you to do that. So it's just at the very beginning. And it's kind of commonly agreed that it's a bit of a ridiculous limitation. Really, your limitation should be your transformer size, your circuit breakers, your conductors, but we're hoping that part of it changes. But for most people, if you fill your roof with solar modules, you may not even have the room on your on your roof to meet your demand. So if you have a lot of demand. Thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you very much for our presenters.